See, it's hard to stand in God's holiness without being hit with the impact of our sin. And his confession shows us that he experiences sin in every aspect of his being. Woe to me! It's as if he's saying, my mind is overwhelmed by sin. I am lost. It is as if he realizes that his spirit is lost, without a compass, without an anchor, if not anchored in the Lord. And I am a man of unclean lips, even his physical being. He senses that sin in his mind, in his spirit, in his physical being. And I am among a people of unclean lips, and he recognizes the sin, not only that dwells within him, but also within community. And it is within that holiness that he experiences the fullness of his sin. And what that means for him, woe to me, for I am a man lost. I want to speak to two people today when we talk about this recognition of sin. That woe to me is so very important, and for the non-believer in the room today, for those who have yet to make Christ your Lord and Savior, experience the woe that is within us. You see, it's hard to experience and to know the magnificence of God's glory without first experiencing and diving deep into the reality of our sin. And when Isaiah says, woe to me, there is a recognition and acknowledgement of the sinfulness that we have in measure to the holiness of God. So if you haven't made Jesus Lord and Savior of your life today, recognize your sin, acknowledge the depth of your sin. Live in that space of woe just for a minute, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's hurtful, even though it may bring some guilt or heavy conscience. But I also want to speak to the believer today. When Isaiah says, woe to me, and he lives in that space, and he experiences the reality of his sin as he confronts God's holiness and grace, he doesn't stay there. Now, I don't know what it says in your translation, but in my translation and in your Pew Bible, it says this, woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. This is verse 5. And my translation, your Pew translation, says, yet my eyes have seen the Lord, my eyes have seen the King. For the believer here who recognizes that woe, you live in that space and you acknowledge your sin, but you're not intended to live within that space. There are so many Christians who say, woe to me, and they keep saying, woe to me. They keep living in that space of that time loop of continuing, rather than experiencing grace and experiencing God's goodness, live in that place in which they are overwhelmed with guilt and burden, and they recognize their sin and acknowledge their sin. They say, woe to me, but they never leave that place. But in the Pew Bible, in the NRSV, in my translation, it says, I am a man of unclean lips. I am a man among people of unclean lips, yet I have seen the Lord. There are Christians, plenty of Christians who experience the woe of sin, but never experience the yet of moving on and of experiencing the Lord. I am a man of unclean lips. I am among the people of unclean lips, yet I have seen the Lord. Have you experienced your yet? It's another way of saying, I recognize my sin. I recognize this. If you're an unbeliever today, you need to live in that space and acknowledge your sin and God's holiness and ask Jesus to be your Lord. But if you are a believer today, you're not intended to live in that space of woe. Yet I have seen the Lord. Yes, I am sinner. We are sinful. Yet we see the Lord. Are you able to move out of that space and allow your eyes to open up to the presence of the Lord? And that's when he experiences the next part of God's grace, and that is salvation.